Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into some really fascinating source materials. An article from Awake magazine titled, "Can Our Planet Survive? Reasons for Hope."
Right.
This piece takes a pretty sharp look at the major challenges facing Earth's vital resources. But then it turns to offer a very specific perspective on why, despite the damage, there might still be reasons for hope for the planet's future.
Yeah,
So our mission today is really to unpack the arguments presented in this particular article.
exactly. We'll dig into what the article highlights about the state of, fresh water, oceans, forests, and air.
Okay.
And then we'll explore the specific basis for hope it lays out. The core question this source tackles is, well, it's a big one. Considering the significant impact humans have had, can our planet truly survive?
Okay, so let's dive right into what the article presents. It definitely doesn't shy away from some pretty stark facts about the state of things, does it?
No, it really doesn't. It starts with something absolutely fundamental to life, fresh water.
The essential resource. But according to this source, it's under, well, immense pressure. It points out that only a tiny fraction, what was it? Only 0.5% of water on Earth is usable and available fresh water.
Yeah, just 0.5%.
Wow. That really puts the pressure on that tiny fraction into stark relief.
And that limited supply is not only facing pollution, but also, increasingly difficult access due to rising demand and climate change. The article includes a prediction that's hard to ignore.
Which is?
Within 30 years, 5 billion people could have inadequate access to fresh water.
5 billion people. Wow. That statistic alone really underscores the urgency the article is highlighting. But then the source also introduces this concept of nature's own resilience, doesn't it? It suggests the Earth has, natural processes already in place to protect and purify water.
It does, yeah. The source describes soil itself as nature's freshwater filter. It explains how layers of sand and rock act like a sieve, the physical part.
Right.
But beyond that, it mentions chemical and biological processes, how microorganisms in the soil can actually neutralize toxins, like bacteria breaking down oils, and how charged particles, things like clay, can capture chemicals such as ammonium.
So the ground itself is doing some heavy lifting and purification. What about in the water bodies themselves, like rivers and lakes?
The article notes that flowing water bodies benefit from biological processes where microorganisms break down organic waste. And here's a truly surprising detail the source brings up.
Okay.
It mentions freshwater clams and mussels that can extract harmful chemicals from the water, claiming they can be potentially even more effectively than water treatment plants.
Wait, clams doing better than our high-tech treatment plants? How does the article explain that? I mean, that sounds almost unbelievable, but the source presents it as a real natural filter.
It doesn't get super deep into the mechanics, no, but it presents it as strong evidence of nature's built-in cleaning systems. And then on a larger scale, there's the hydrologic cycle, the water cycle, which the source says traps water and prevents it from just, disappearing from our atmosphere.
So the article makes a pretty strong case for nature having these inherent self-healing mechanisms. But it also looks at what we're doing, right? What humans are doing about the problem.
Yes. It touches on efforts like conserving water use, repairing oil leaks to prevent contamination, and stressing the importance of properly disposing of toxins instead of just flushing them. It also brings up desalination.
Turning salt water into fresh water. That feels like a modern solution that can maybe scale up.
Well, the source acknowledges modern desalination methods, but it's quick to point out their significant drawbacks, at least as presented in the article.
Like what?
They're high cost and require excessive energy, so the article calls them unrealistic as a large-scale solution. And it pairs this with a pretty stark quote from a UN source it includes, stating that, globally, the current rate of progress needs to be doubled.
Doubled. So the human efforts described, they don't seem to be keeping pace with the problem's growth, according to this source.
That seems to be the takeaway, yeah.
So, if human efforts aren't presented as sufficient, how does this article introduce hope for the freshwater crisis? Where does it see the solution coming from?
This is where the source introduces its specific perspective. It grounds its hope in a creator. It quotes Job 36.26-28 and Ecclesiastes 1.7.
Okay.
Using these to suggest that God not only created, but also engineered the natural water cycles and purification processes we were just talking about.
Right, the clams, the soil filtering.
Exactly. And the question it then poses to the reader is basically, if the creator engineered processes to purify fresh water, might he be able and willing to repair the man-made harm to this vital resource.
Ah, okay. So the potential for intervention from the Creator is the specific basis for hope presented in this source regarding fresh water.
Precisely. That's the angle it takes.
Okay, so that's water. Let's shift focus now to something else the article examines, the oceans. It calls them the planet's life support system.
And with good reason, according to the source. It highlights how crucial they are for food, medicine, and ingredients. They generate over half the world's oxygen.
Over half.
Yeah, they absorb a huge amount of carbon and regulate global climate. They do a lot.
But the article paints a pretty grim picture of their current state, calling it a crisis. It highlights threats like climate change severely impacting reefs, predicting, almost all reefs could be at risk of dying within the next 30 years.
And the devastating impact of plastic pollution, the article says up to 90% of seabirds may have eaten plastic, and that plastic kills millions of sea animals every year.
That's horrifying.
The source really doesn't pull punches here. It uses the UN Secretary General's quote, calling it an ocean emergency. It really emphasizes the scale of the damage being done.
What's fascinating, though, is that the source, again, points to nature's own power to push back against this. It states, oceans have an innate regenerative capacity when they're given a chance, when they're protected.
It provides some compelling examples. Phytoplankton, you know, those tiny marine organisms?
Yeah.
They aren't just food. They consume and store CO2. The source points out they store almost the same amount of carbon dioxide as that stored by all the trees, grasses, and other land-based plants on Earth combined.
Whoa, hang on. Almost the same as all land plants combined. That's an absolutely massive natural carbon sink the article is highlighting there.
Incredible, isn't it? These microscopic things doing so much.
Definitely.
Then there are microbes that feed on fish waste, playing a role in keeping the ocean clean and clear. And the article mentions some ocean creatures whose digestion actually transforms acidic water into healthier alkaline water.
In seagrasses, too, the source describes them trapping sediment, stabilizing the seafloor, reducing coral disease, and protecting coastlines by reducing waves and erosion. It seems like nature has designed layers upon layers of protection and recovery mechanisms.
It certainly highlights that natural capacity, but then the article contrasts this resilience with the current scale of human effort to fix the problems. It mentions individual actions, like reusing bags and containers to reduce plastic waste, which are positive steps.
Every bit helps, but the numbers the source uses to describe the problem, they make those individual efforts feel pretty small in comparison. It says an environmental organization collected 9,200 tons of beach litter in a year, which sounds like a lot of plastic removed.
It does sound like a lot, yet the article immediately adds that this was only about 1,000th of the trash that enters the ocean each year.
1,000th. Oof. That stat really highlights the overwhelming scale of the pollution problem versus the current human efforts.
Puts it in stark perspective.
Yeah.
And the article includes some pretty tough quotes from a National Geographic report it cites, saying acidification is probably irreversible, and that sea creatures are up against a global economy built on cheap fossil fuels. It's not a fair fight.
So similar to freshwater, the human efforts discussed in the article seem, insufficient to fully reverse or stop the current scale of damage. So where does this source find hope for the oceans then?
Well, based on the pattern we're seeing...
I'm guessing it again looks to the Creator.
You got it. It quotes Psalm 104.24-25, highlighting God's extensive knowledge of the sea and all the life within it.
Yeah.
The vastness and complexity.
Okay. And the question it puts to the reader is, if he knows so much about the sea and all marine life, might he also be qualified to undo the damage that has been done to our oceans?
Exactly.
So again, the hope is presented as coming from the Creator's knowledge and ability to intervene.
That's the core message, yes. It places the ultimate hope there.
Okay. Moving on, the article shifts to forests, describing them as the lungs and life support system of the planet.
Absolutely critical role players. They absorb CO2, emit O2, and provide home to, an estimated 80% of land life. The article really emphasizes how devastating their loss is.
And the scale of that loss is huge. Billions of trees cut annually, largely for agriculture, with half of the world's rainforests gone since the late 1940s. Losing forests means losing all those vital ecosystem services they provide.
But again, just like with water and oceans, the article provides surprising examples of nature's resilience, specifically the ability of deforested lands to recover naturally.
Really? How so?
It mentions studies showing abandoned farming plots in the Americas and West Africa where soil health actually bounced back within 10 years.
Just 10 years to get the soil back. That
Yeah.
seems that's a much faster natural recovery timeline than I might have expected.
It's quite remarkable, and researchers cited in the article estimate that within about 100 years, the lands could naturally achieve a healthy diversity of trees and other species, even after being completely cleared.
A century for natural diversity to return. That's still a long time, but it is a remarkable demonstration of nature's drive to restore itself.
And maybe the most surprising finding the article shares is about a study in Brazil. It was mentioned in a National Geographic report where researchers found tree planting was unnecessary in some areas.
Unnecessary.
Yeah. In tested plots with just minimal human help, they were apparently full of native trees in just 5 years. Nature just took over.
Wow. So the article highlights that nature has such a powerful drive to regrow forests, sometimes even without active human replanting. That's an incredible natural capacity for recovery it's pointing to.
Definitely. And the article does acknowledge that human efforts are also being made globally to manage and restore forests. It mentions a UN source reporting that global deforestation has slowed by more than 50% over the past 25 years.
Okay, that sounds like real progress then. A slowing rate.
It is presented as progress, yes, but the article immediately contrasts this with the ongoing persistent threat. It quotes a report stating, "The rate of primary forest loss in the tropics has been stubbornly consistent."
Stubbornly consistent.
Driven, it says, by massive illegal logging and commercial exploitation, billions of dollars involved.
So while the overall rate might have slowed globally, the actual loss of critical primary forests, the really important ones, from illegal and commercial activity is still massive, as the article points out. The problem continues in a significant scale.
Seems so.
So given this mix of resilience, some progress, but this ongoing threat, where does this source find hope for forests? Let me guess.
Consistent with the pattern, the hope is rooted in the Creator. The article references Genesis 2.9, which describes God planting trees, sort of highlighting a design for recovery from sustainable use.
Okay.
It then states that God wants to preserve forests and will put an end to the mismanagement of Earth's resources, and it specifically references Revelation 11.18 for that.
So the hope is specifically that God will step in and stop the destructive practices humans are engaging in.
That's the idea presented, yes. And that this divine intervention will ensure the planet and life survive, ultimately leading to a beautiful paradise, referencing Psalm 145.16.
Okay.
So the source connects the Creator's original design and this promised future intervention as the basis for hope for forests.
Right. Finally, the article turns its focus to the air we breathe.
Which, as the article reminds us, is crucial for so much more than just breathing. It shields us from harmful radiation, helps regulate temperature. It's our protective blanket.
But it's under severe threat from pollution. The article presents a really chilling statistic here. Only 1% of Earth's population is breathing air that meets the World Health Organization's standards of safety.
Only 1%. Think about that.
That's staggering.
And it directly links this widespread pollution to serious health issues like respiratory illness, lung cancer, cardiovascular problems, and tragically, to premature deaths. The article cites some 7 million premature deaths each year.
7 million. That really highlights the direct, devastating human cost of air pollution that the source emphasizes. Does the article point to nature having resilience in cleaning the air too? Is there a parallel here?
It does, yeah. It mentions natural processes that work effectively when pollution levels are, quote, sustainable. It points out that while forests absorb CO2, coastal wetlands with mangroves are even more efficient. They absorb as much as 5 times more carbon dioxide than tropical forests can.
5 times more. Wow. Another specific, powerful natural helper the article highlights, like the clams for water.
Exactly. And certain large algae like kelp are mentioned for their ability to capture and actually bury CO2 on the ocean floor, sequestering it for centuries.
So nature seems to have multiple strategies for tackling carbon in the atmosphere, as the article describes it, not just trees.
That's the picture it paints. The article also points to the atmosphere's capacity for quick recovery when pollution stops. It uses the stark example of the COVID-19 lockdown in 2020.
Right. I remember seeing pictures of clearer skies.
Exactly. When pollution from industries and vehicles drastically reduced, air quality quickly improved. The article mentions that more than 80% of participating countries reported having cleaner air shortly after the lockdown.
And the example the source gives of the rapid drop in New Delhi's PM2.5 levels during that time. That's a powerful demonstration of how quickly air quality can recover if the source of pollution is removed or reduced.
It really is. It showed that natural capacity for atmospheric recovery, the article is emphasizing. It can bounce back to a degree.
So what human efforts are mentioned in the article for cleaning the air?
Well, the source discusses governments pressing industries to reduce emissions, scientists discovering new solutions like microbes that can turn pollutants non-toxic, and promoting personal actions, walking, cycling, improving energy efficiency.
Those sound like positive steps being taken, sensible things.
They are presented as such, but the article points to a significant, widespread obstacle. A 2022 report it cited showed that about 1/3 of the global population relied mainly on air-polluting cooking fuels and technologies.
A third of the world.
And for many, it says, affordable alternatives simply aren't available. So the article highlights that the global scale of the problem, particularly in developing regions, is still immense. Access to cleaner tech is a huge issue.
Right. So, again, the challenge seems overwhelming despite efforts. Where does this source find its hope regarding the pollution of our air?
Just like with the other resources, water, oceans, forests, the hope presented is rooted in the Creator. It quotes Isaiah 42.5, referring to God as the Creator who gives breath to everyone on earth.
Okay, connecting breath and life to the Creator.
And the pointed question it then poses to the reader is basically, does it seem reasonable that he would do nothing about the pollution of our air?
So the hope the article presents is that the Creator who designed our atmosphere and gives life through the air we breathe won't just abandon it to the level of pollution humans have caused.
That's the core argument for hope regarding air pollution in this source, yes.
Okay, let's try and bring all these threads together now. The article presents these really serious problems for fresh water, oceans, forests, and air. It details the damage quite extensively, but woven throughout, it also highlights nature's impressive resilience, right? This capacity for self-repair in each of these areas.
It does. It even includes that quote from an international team of researchers at site saying, "The Earth is more resilient than we thought."
Which is honestly a genuinely hopeful takeaway on its own, isn't it?
Right.
That the planet has these built-in repair mechanisms.
It is. But the source then makes a crucial point. Despite this resilience, it concludes that more than natural processes is needed for our planet to survive, given the sheer extent of man-made damage across these vital systems.
Right. The damage is just too much for nature alone, or current human efforts, according to this article.
And this leads directly into the source's ultimate basis for hope, its confidence that God will act. It explicitly references several points from the Bible as the foundation for this belief in a positive outcome.
Okay, so what are the key points the source uses from the Bible to build that case for hope?
Well, it cites that God created the planet, referencing Genesis 1.1, that he owns it, citing Psalm 24.1, and that he designed it with incredible stability, not to be removed from its place forever, citing Psalm 104.5.
Okay, so connecting its creation and design with a sense of permanence and ownership by the Creator.
Exactly. It also emphasizes God's stated purpose for the earth, that he formed it to be inhabited, using Isaiah 45.18, and promises that humans will live on it forever, citing Psalm 37.29.
Okay.
According to this source, these are presented as the Creator's own promises regarding the planet's ultimate purpose and its future.
And how does the source connect these promises to the problems of damage and pollution we've been discussing throughout this deep dive?
The article reiterates the promise from Revelation 11.18 that God will, quote, bring to ruin those ruining the earth, basically stepping in to stop the abuse and exploitation.
Okay. A direct intervention against the cause of the problem.
That's how it's framed. And the promise from Psalm 145.16 that God will ultimately turn the planet into a healthy, beautiful paradise, satisfying the desires of living things.
So, just to be clear for you listening, the specific reasons for hope presented in this source material, in this Awake article, are explicitly rooted in these religious promises, a belief that the Creator designed the planet for a permanent, inhabited future, and will intervene to stop the damage and restore it to a kind of paradisaic state.
That is precisely the framework of hope presented by this particular article we've been examining. Its conclusion is that while nature is resilient, the scale of human damage requires more than just natural processes or current human efforts. It requires, in their view, divine intervention as promised in the scriptures it cites.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into the Awake article, can our planet survive? Reasons for hope. We've journeyed through the serious threats the source highlights for our planet's vital systems, freshwater, oceans, forests, and air.
We have, and we've seen how the article points to a surprising degree of resilience built into Earth's natural processes, these mechanisms that actively work towards healing and restoration.
We've also looked at the human efforts underway, at least as presented by the source, and how it portrays them as, well, currently insufficient against the scale of the damage being done globally.
Mhm. And finally, we've explored the very specific basis for ultimate hope presented by this particular source material, a hope rooted entirely in the promises it attributes to a creator regarding the Earth's design, its purpose, and its ultimate future.
So this deep dive offers really a distinct perspective on a critical global issue. It combines observations of natural processes, which are fascinating in themselves, with a specific faith-based outlook on what the future holds for our planet.
It certainly gives a particular answer, its own answer, to that fundamental question of whether our planet can ultimately survive the challenges it faces.
So, based solely on the source material we've just unpacked here today, here's something for you to consider. Given the incredible resilience built into Earth's natural systems that the article describes quite vividly, does the source's conclusion that a creator designed the planet to be inhabited and will intervene to ensure its survival, does that resonate for you as a possible explanation for that resilience and maybe a basis for ultimate hope? Something to think about.